Are you all ready? So this is contemplative week still, and what I was interested in doing was putting together some of Walt Whitman's conceptions with what we've been dealing with already in sitting, and whatever bases we've been touching as to the nature of the mind. In Wayland's class, as you remember, we did bring up the subject of negative capability and defined it as the ability to hold contrary ideas in the mind without an irritable reaching out after fact and reason. That is to say, the ability to not freak out when confronted by contradiction and chaos, but simply, in a sense, hold your seat or hold your mind and just observe them, rather than trying to strangle one or the other, as a kind of easy way out of having to make decisions which are not necessary to make necessarily. Somewhat like Gregory Corso's notion of if you got a choice of two things, take both. So it's a little bit also like Coleridge has a phrase, I guess it's Coleridge or Wordsworth, the willing suspension of disbelief. When you're listening to a story, you just, suspend judgment and you take it in, also relating to the people or relating to the phenomenal world, not necessarily having to rush to judgment constantly, but maybe emphasizing a quality of appreciation, perception and appreciation and noticing and checking things out before insisting on jumping or making a decision or pulling the gallows rope or turning on the switch for the electric chair. That's just the nature of the mind itself, actually, because we think of all different things all at the same time, and Whitman was good at pointing that out. So what I want to start with, first of all, was a general vision of society in America that Whitman proposed in his prose works, Democratic Vistas and the prefaces to Leaves of Grass, his major work. How many here have read some of Whitman's prose? Oh, good. Well, Democratic Vistas and the prose work. How many have read prose work by Whitman? Yeah, some. Preface to Leaves of Grass, any of them? And Democratic Vistas? They're terrific. So what I've done is pick out some gists that have always turned me on, that I've accumulated over the years, that seem to me really good advice or guidance for both poetics and general behavior of mind or liberation of mind. First of all, a word that he uses that I keep recurring to that's a really interesting one, candor. C-A-N-D-O-R. Does anybody know what candor is? It's an odd word, actually. You have frankness, you have truthfulness, you have what are the other words that would be equivalent? Huh? LSD, did you say? Oh. Honesty. Yeah. Honesty. Forthrightness is pretty good. That's about as close to candor as there is. Honesty is a little too Boy Scout. Candor is inadvertent in a sense. It's forthrightness, but it's accidental, like a byproduct. You're just talking and you say something, you blurt out. It's like blurting out by accident or inadvertently something that is frank. So there's somewhere like inadvertent frankness. What was the word you used? Inadvertent forthrightness. That'd be a good description. So, from Preface to Leaves of Grass, 1855. The great poets are also to be known by the absence in them of tricks and by the justification of perfect personal candor. Dig that phrase, perfect personal candor. Then folks echo a new cheap joy and a divine voice leaping from their brains. How beautiful is candor. He's being very folksy here. Then folks echo a new cheap joy, i.e. he doesn't mean trashy joy, an inexpensive joy, a joy that anybody can can possess or own. You don't have to buy it, because it's just your own forthright spontaneity. Then folks echo a new cheap joy in a divine voice leaping from their brains. How beautiful is candor! All faults may be forgiven of him who has perfect candor. Henceforth let no man of us lie, for we have seen that openness wins the inner and outer world, and that there is no single exception, and that never since our earth gathered itself into a mass have deceit or subterfuge or prevarication attracted its smallest particle or the faintest tinge of a shade, and that through the enveloping wealth and rank of a state, or the whole republic of states, a sneak or a sly person shall be discovered and despised. So what's happening with Ollie North? Or Reagan? Well, actually, that was Nixon more, the sneak or sly person, discovered and despised. That the soul has never been once fooled and never can be fooled. Well, whether that's true or not, I don't know. But anyway, he's also saying that he's proposing that for poets, which is to say poets, and his phrase, poets and orators to come. He's proposing that those of our generations, which is to say mid-20th century, say 100 years hence, 100 years from the time this was written, this is 1855, to the time of Howell would be 1855. And Howell is marked by candor of some kind. And I was at the time, after writing Howell, I got very much involved with trying to read all through this book of Whitman, this particular edition, which is the Modern Library, and pick up on it. And when I came on this passage about candor, that really turned me on. How far could you go then to frankness, forthrightness? I think this was before the vogue of confessional poetry, but the confessional poetry might be included in it if the confession is actually candid rather than overdramatic. And most confessional poetry tends to melodramatize the confession rather than, it tends less to candor than to striking, well, to some melodrama, let us say. Striking poses at the moon or something. Next little key thing that I liked was as to the why candor instead of just writing elegantly like other poets. The poems distilled from other poems will probably pass away. The poems distilled from other poems, imitation of other poems, will probably pass away. The coward will surely pass away. The expectation of the vital and the great can only be satisfied by the demeanor of the vital and the great. The swarms of the polished, deprecating and reflectors and the polite float off and leave no remembrance. America prepares with composure and goodwill for the visitors that have sent word. It is not intellect that is to be their warrant and welcome. The talented, the artist, the ingenious, the editor, the statesman, the erudite, they're not unappreciated. They fall in their place and do their work. The soul of the nation also does its work. No disguise can pass on it. No disguise can conceal from it. It rejects none. It permits all. Only toward as good as itself and toward the like of itself will it advance halfway. An individual is as superb as a nation when he has the qualities which make a superb nation. The soul of the largest and wealthiest and proudest nation may well go halfway to meet that of its poets. The signs are effectual. There's no fear of mistake. If one is true, the other is true. The proof of a poet is that his country absorbs him as affectionately as he has absorbed it. Well, that's kind of idealistic, though I would say that that's probably true of Kerouac as a poet, that the country has absorbed him as affectionately as he has absorbed it, at least for the sort of non-snippy intellectual critics. But as far as the rank and file of youthful readers, I think probably Kerouac has been affectionately absorbed. Burroughs, oddly enough, in a funny way, by the new wave and the punk rockers, has been affectionately absorbed into the notion of cut-up and end of the world humor, the black humor of post-nuclear diseases, and mass hypnosis and governmental insanity and secret syndicate boardroom plots and paranoias. That whole area, which is nowadays so common, which once was only the province of Edgar Allan Poe, that whole sort of meta-paranoia, social meta-paranoia, people see humor in now at this point. However, what's the actual situation in America, according to him, in democratic vistas? That's quite a statement. Vistas, perspectives, or what can you expect? What are you expecting, or what can you see ahead? What's the panorama ahead? This is kind of interesting coming from the 19th century, because it's very up to date as far as, let us say, Ivan Boesky and Wall Street and Lockheed scandals and New York City buying and selling of contracts and WedTech scandals and whatnot. I say we had best look our times and lands searchingly in the face, like a physician diagnosing some deep disease. Never was there, perhaps, more hollowness at heart than at present, and here in the United States. Never was there perhaps more hollowness at heart than at present, and here in the United States. Genuine belief seems to have left us. The underlying principles of the states are not honestly believed in. For all this hectic glow, and for all these melodramatic screamings, that's sort of like Ollie North, for all these melodramatic screamings, nor is humanity itself believed in. What penetrating eye does not everywhere see through the mask? The spectacle is appalling. We live in an atmosphere of hypocrisy throughout. The men believe not in the women, nor the women in the men. A scornful superciliousness rules in literature. The aim of all the litterateurs is to find something to make fun of. A lot of churches, sects, etc., the most dismal phantasms I know, usurp the name of religion. Conversation is a mass of badinage. From deceit in the spirit, the mother of all false deeds, the offspring is already incalculable. An acute and candid person in the Revenue Department in Washington, who is led by the course of his employment to regularly visit the cities, north, south, and west, to investigate frauds, has talked much with me about his discoveries. The depravity of the business classes of our country is not less than has been supposed, but infinitely greater. The official services of America, national, state, and municipal, in all their branches and departments, except the judiciary, are saturated in corruption, bribery, falsehood, maladministration, and the judiciary is tainted. The great cities reek with respectable as much as non-respectable robbery and scoundrelism. In fashionable life, flippancy, tepid amours, weak infidelism, small aims or no aims at all, only to kill time. In business, this all-devouring modern word, business, the one sole object is, by any means, pecuniary gain. The magician's serpent in the fable ate up all the other serpents. The money-making is our magician's serpent, remaining today sole master of the field. The best class we show is but a mob of fashionably dressed speculators and vulgarians. That's the yuppies. The best class we show is but a mob of fashionably dressed speculators and vulgarians. True indeed, behind this fantastic farce, enacted on the visible stage of society, solid things and stupendous labors like Naropa Institute are to be discovered, existing crudely and going on in the background to advance and tell themselves in time. Yet the truths are nonetheless terrible. I say that our New World democracy, however great a success in uplifting the masses out of their sloth, in materialistic development, products, in a certain highly deceptive, superficial, popular intellectuality, that's kind of nice, a certain highly deceptive, superficial, popular intellectuality is so far an almost complete failure in its social aspects and in really grand religious, moral, literary, and aesthetic results. In vain do we march with unprecedented strides to empire, so colossal, outvying the antique, beyond Alexander's, beyond the proudest sway of Rome. In vain have we annexed Texas, California, Alaska, and reached north for Canada and south for Cuba. It is as if we were somehow being endowed with a vast and more and more thoroughly appointed body, and then left with little or no soul. So that was his estimate of sort of the uncandid America of his day, and the basic what comes out in Faulkner as the Snopes, in Sinclair Lewis as Babbitt, in the Beatles as the Blue Meanies, or in Dylan maybe as Mr. Jones, or You Got to Serve Somebody, or difficult as it will be, it has become, in my opinion, imperative to achieve a shifted attitude from superior men and women towards the thought and fact of sexuality as an element in character, personality, the emotions, and a theme in literature. So that's really terrific encouragement, I think, from Whitman, because that's really out of the horse's mouth in terms of American literature, to get a sort of permission and blessing from Whitman to not only be candid, but also be candid about the thought and fact of sexuality as a element in character, personality, the emotions, and a theme in literature. And it's something that I think in our own generations, in the 20th century, we've sort of ripened out of Whitman. It's something that he prophesied, and that was performed, or begun to be performed. There was a lot of problem with that. Like, Emerson thought that, Ralph Waldo Emerson thought that Whitman was an absolutely marvelous writer, but when he saw a later edition of Leaves of Grass, I think that had Calamus, he advised Whitman not to publish those poems and to suppress or set aside the poems that were more frank or candid or overt. And there's an odd note in Whitman's Specimen Days, A Visit at the Last to Ralph Waldo Emerson. It says, he went up to Boston and spent a lot of time on Boston Common. I know all about the big trees, especially the old elms along Tremont and Beacon Streets, and have come to a sociable, silent understanding with most of them in the sunlit air, yet crispy cool enough as I saunter along the wide, unpaved walks. Up and down this breadth by Beacon Street, between these same old elms, I've walked for 2 hours of a bright, sharp February midday 21 years ago with Emerson, then in his prime, keen, physically and morally magnetic, armed at every point, and when he chose, welding the emotional just as well as the intellectual. During those 2 hours, he was the talker and I the listener. It was an argument, statement, reconnoitering, review, attack, and pressing home, like an army corps in order, artillery, cavalry, and infantry, of all that could be said against that part and a main part in the construction of my poems, Children of Adam. That's the overt sexual description. More precious than gold to me, that dissertation. It afforded me ever after this strange and paradoxical lesson. Each point of Emerson's statements was unanswerable. No judge's charge ever more complete or convincing. I could never hear the points better put. And then I felt down in my soul the clear and unmistakable conviction to disobey all and pursue my own way. What have you to say then to such things, said Emerson, pausing in conclusion. Only that while I can't answer them all, I feel more settled than ever to adhere to my own theory and exemplify it, was my candid response. Whereupon we went and had a good dinner at the American House. And thenceforth I have never wavered or was touched with qualms, as I confess I had been 2 or 3 times before. So it's a real interesting moment. Don't do it, Walt. You get in trouble. Well, okay, what is he saying here? I'll read you a couple of these little tidbits from Calamus.
What was he referring to?
Children of Adam, the section Children of Adam, and I think it's a section, as I seem to remember. It's a long poem with a number of sections. Well, no, it's a long poem that has famous poems like From Pent-Up Aching Rivers, about longing, sexual, erotic longing. Then the famous I Sing the Body Electric. It is in the limbs and joints also. It is curiously in the joints of his hips and wrists. It is in his walk, the carriage of his neck, the flex of his waist and knees. Dress does not hide him. The strong, sweet quality strikes through cotton and broadcloth. You linger to see his back and the back of his neck and shoulder side. So it's pretty clear, that. Then there's descriptions of genitals here for the first time, probably. Let's see. Is that section A Man's Body at Auction, you know? That. Then a description of the male body. Gentlemen, look at this wonder. Whatever the bids of the bidders, they cannot be high enough for it. For it the globe lay preparing quintillions of years without one animal or plant. For it the revolving cycles truly and steadily rolled, etc., etc., etc. Within there runs blood, the same old blood, the same red running blood. There swells and jets a heart. There all passions, desires, reachings, aspirations. Do you think they are not there because they are not expressed in parlors and lecture rooms? Then a woman's body at auction. And then another section, oh, my body, I dare not desert the likes of you and other men and women, nor the likes of parts of you. And that gives him the chance to go through a catalog of all the parts of the body, so that he can include the genitals. Broad breath, including beginning with head, neck, hair, ears, droop and tympan of the ears, eyes, eye fringes, iris of the eye, eyebrows, and the waking or sleeping of the lids, mouth, tongue, lips, roof, teeth, roof of the mouth, jaws, and the jaw hinges, nose, nostrils of the nose, and the partition, cheeks, temples, forehead, chin, throat, back of the neck, slew, strong shoulders, manly beard, scapula, hind shoulders, and the ample side round of the chest, upper arm, armpit, elbow socket, lower arm, arm sinews, arm bones, wrists and wrist joints, hands, palm, knuckles, thumb, forefinger, finger joints, and fingernails, broad breast front, curling hair of the breast, breastbone, breast side, ribs, belly, backbone, joints of the backbone, hips, hip socket, hip strength, inward and outward round, man balls, man root, strong set of thighs, well carrying the trunk above, leg fibers, knee pan, upper leg, under leg, ankles, instep, football, toes, toe joints, the heel. All attitudes, all the shapeliness, all the belongings of my or your body or anyone's body, male or female. Then goes inside to the lunge, sponges, and stomach sac. The bowels, sweet and clean. In the end, oh, I say now, these are the soul. And that's followed by a woman waits for me, and then spontaneous me, which has a line, the sensitive, orbic, underlapped brothers, that only privileged feelers may be intimate where they are. His language is very funny. And I am he that aches with love. Does the earth gravitate? Does it all matter? Aching attract all matter? So the body of me to all those I meet and know. And then comes the native moments. Native moments, when you come upon me, you're here now. Give me libidinous joys only. Give me the drench of my passions. Give me life, coarse and rank. Today I go consort with nature's darlings. Tonight, too, I am for those who believe in loose delights. I share the midnight orgies of young men. I dance with the dancers and drink with the drinkers. The echoes ring with our indecent calls. I pick out some low person for my dearest friend. He shall be lawless, rude, illiterate. He shall be one condemned by others for deeds alone. I will play a part no longer. Why should I exile myself from my companions? O you shunned persons, I at least do not shun you. I will come forthwith in your midst. I will be your poet. I'll be more to you than any of the rest. That's pretty good. Then, as Adam early in the morning is a very direct invitation, is the last poem in this, Children of Adam. As Adam, early in the morning, walking forth from the bower refreshed with sleep, behold me where I pass, hear my voice, approach, touch me. Touch the palm of your hand to my body as I pass. Be not afraid of my body. That's pretty daring. I wonder if anybody would. I wonder if he means it literally. And I wonder if he wants all the fat ladies from the circus waddling down the street to do that too. Or does he just want the cute people to do that? Or the handsome laborers? But does he also want the leprous subway conductors to touch him with the palm of... That's the only that's the only sort of immediate caveat or footnote or counterthought you can have to Whitman, that yes, he wants to sleep with everybody and embrace everybody, man, woman, beast, but does he really, literally, or is this just a disguise so he can get what he wants? Does he have to universalize it so he can name also his own longing? And finally, he says that the very first poem in Calamus, another of the poems that Emerson objected to, about 15th line, resolved to sing no songs today but those of manly attachment. And that's about as overt as you can get. I proceed for all who are or have been young men to tell the secret of my nights and days, to celebrate the need of comrades. Then he goes on with some very overt gay poems, actually, or semi. As a matter of candor, I heard the rustling of the liquid and sands as directed to me, whispering to congratulate me, for the one I love most lay sleeping by me under the same cover in the cool night, in the stillness. In the autumn moonbeams, his face was inclined toward me, and his arm lay lightly around my breast, and that night I was happy. And there's this funny little poem about a glimpse through an interstice caught of a crowd of workmen and drivers in a bar room around the stove of a late winter night, and I, unremarked, seated in a corner, of a youth who loves me and whom I love, silently approaching and seating himself near, that he may hold me by the hand. A long while amid the noises of coming and going, of drinking and oath and smutty jests, there we two, content, being happy in being together, speaking little, perhaps not a word. So it's a really photograph, like a snapshot. So he did accomplish his own candor, in a way. So that's kind of partly his vision. No, I wouldn't say it's necessarily the gay element is in there, but I think it's sort of more the erotic pantheism and the even beyond eros, the sense of openness, candor. In other words, I think his point was more candor than it was homosexuality. The point of these kind of poems was that anybody has their own heart, anybody has their own loves, or as the painter Larry Rivers said to Kerouac in 1958, everybody's got a big dong. Everybody has their own tender heart, their own frustrations, their own longings. So Whitman was exemplary in opening himself up and expressing his own interior. But when you get into the interior, then how far, what do you get? What do you finally find? So there are some ideas in him relating to what is the ego and what is the nature of the ego and what is the nature of the self that's interesting to compare to some Buddhist notions of the fact that there is no permanent self, or there is no fixed selfhood that can be relied on. Do you know in Buddhist theory the three marks of existence or three characteristics of existence? Does that come up at any point this week or before, particularly for the summer students? How many know that? And how many not heard of that particular shot? The what? No. A thing called three marks of existence. Those who have not heard of it with me. Okay, so I better make a little footnote just to compare Whitman's take with the classical Buddhist take. The traditional three characteristics of existence, which is the basis of all Buddhist philosophy and action and practicality and sitting, is three main ideas which may sound Himalayan or Oriental, but which are also built into Western philosophy from Heraclitus to Heisenberg. So it's both Eastern and Western. And don't let anybody bullshit you about East is East and West is West and never the twain shall meet, or the gooks have different minds from us, or different, basic consciousness. So the three characteristics are, first of all, existence contains suffering. Bad news to somebody, maybe. Kerouac once told me that, and I thought he was being mean. I actually resented it and thought that he was just trying to bring me down as a Jewish intellectual. But he was laying this trip on me that existence was suffering and painful. But it's actually just a fact that if you're born, sooner you become and recognize at some point or other that you also have the characteristic of a hairy bag of water, and that you're going to die. And so there's going to be some, if you don't like the word suffering, you can say there's going to be some uncomfortableness at some point or other. Old age, sickness, and death, or break your pinky, or whatever. With the body, there's certainly some sense of the possibility of not being young and 22 forever, or 18. It's hard to imagine if you're a nubile ephebi or pubescent fawn or pretty kitten, but old age, illness, and death are inevitable. And why not? Who knew one? At least not in this form. And this is what we got for the moment. So there is the basic understanding that existence contains suffering, or perhaps some even go as far as to say existence itself is suffering, because it disturbs the grand space of no mind, let us say. I don't know. I wouldn't want to go too heavy on that. Secondly, all the constituents of being are transitory. All the elements are transitory. Heraclitus says you can't, Heraclitus, pre-Socratic Greek philosopher, you can't step in the same river twice. And as amended by, the water's already flowed on, so it's a different river. So everything is flux. That's another translation. Everything is flux. Has anybody read any Heraclitus? Very good reading. It's real simple, fast reading. He left only maybe 101 sayings, sentences, and they're the source of a huge amount of Western literature, because he was a non-theistic, pre-Socratic, pre-Christian wise man who boiled down all of his wisdom into like a few epithets, like everything is flux, or you can't step in the same river twice. And Gregory Corso amended that to you can't step in the same river once. I don't know exactly what that means, but it sounds right. Otherwise, you got a same river. So it eliminates the same. You can step in the same river once. I mean, you can step in the river. You can step in the river. But you can't step in the same river. So you can't step in the same river once. So, so far, does anybody completely disagree with the first point that there is some suffering in existence? Is there anyone that feels that that's being sentimental? or cruel? And then is there anybody that would disagree with the notion that everything is flux, or the Buddhist view, the Buddhist terminology for that, or formulation is very pretty. All the constituents of being are transitory. That is partly derived from the notion of flux, and that's partly derived from, say, in Western terms, you could compare it with Heisenberg, or who are the people that reduce matter to waves, and then waves to particles, and then finally to indeterminacy? What scientist is that? Pardon me? Well, Heisenberg, Bohr, later, I suppose, in philosophy, Wittgenstein. But anyway, so far, observation impedes function. In other words, if you stop a wave, it's no longer a wave. If you stop a wave to examine it, it's no longer a wave. And there's another really interesting shot given to prove that that there is nothing objective, nothing is a fixed object, that everything, in a sense, is subjective, or flowing in that sense. The latest physics theory is that in order to have objective data, you need one molecule clanking against another molecule, and then you need an observer or an ear, or someone to hear it clanking. In other words, the observer, the human observer, the subject, is part of the tripartite equation, that without the observer, there is no observation. And that is an old Buddhist view, but it's also now a view of physics, so that you have to take into consideration the subject observation. So that means that nothing is objective. Everything is subjective, because subject observes the objects. So objects are only seen by a subject, yourself, which makes the universe person. Yeah?
Physicists say the character of an object under observation changes?
Yeah. Well, what I said is observation impedes function. The character of an object under observation changes. That's one shading of that idea. But the other is that altogether is eyeballs that see the objects, so the objects and the eyeballs are inseparable. The only way we know things outside of ourselves or inside is that we have senses and subject. We're persons that are alive, and so everything is alive on account of we're seeing it. Or it only occurs to us through our own subjective life. So you can't say it's 100% objective unless you had a robot observing a robot or something, but somebody got to build it anyway and program it. Well, anyway, so that all boils down to all the constituents of being are transitory, and that leads to the third thought, or third conception, third mark of existence, that therefore there is no permanent selfhood, no permanent Allen Ginsberg, no permanent ego, no permanent me, no permanent identity. You might even extend it if you were bold enough and willing to take a try. No soul. No soul. Not even a soul to rely on. So Whitman used the word soul. Now how bleak does that look? No soul. Or doesn't it look? Maybe it's a liberation. We don't have to be stuck with some kind of fixed idea of what we're supposed to be. Maybe it's totally wide open like the sky, that it doesn't have to be codified into a thingy like a soul, any more than it has to be codified into a thingy like an ego. So the Sanskrit word for that is anatma. Atman, self, soul, self. Anatma, no soul. What there is space, and what there is also is openness, open space, potentiality. Anything can happen. The womb of existence, this space that we're all hanging in, including the Rocky Mountains and the Flatirons and the old school buildings and the trees. But that's maybe a little more subtle. But at any rate, no, you could say, if you don't want to say no soul, you could say no fixed identity. Would that be acceptable? Would anybody find that unacceptable? I'm trying to find the noticeable American words that equate with the classical terminology. Oh, the Sanskrit, anatma. I think everybody would agree with the first one. Pain exists. The second one, everything changes. The third one, people would argue about. So, but there's a God. I depend on that. That's the stable reference point. He don't change. He's absolute. But then you got to realize it's people talking about God, and people change. That's Gregory's view. That it's people that talk about death, and people that talk about God, and people that talk about life. So you haven't gotten any direct God. All you got is people anyway, and people are definitely untrustworthy. Don't trust people. Certainly not for ultimate absolute opinions. So that's the same Einsteinian thing, that the measuring instrument determines the shape of the universe. It's still subjective. Even God has to be the notion of a transitory subjective consciousness. Well, I don't know if that's worth getting into any further. Anyway. Okay, so what does Whitman say? Given this as sort of a basic shot, or what? Regarding ego, from Song of Myself. Well, here's his presentation of his question: who he is, what is ego? Who goes there, hankering, gross, mystical, nude? How is it I extract strength from the beef I eat? What is a man anyhow? What am I? What are you? All I mark as my own, you shall offset it with your own, else it were lost time listening to me. I do not snivel that snivel the world over, that months are vacuums in the ground but wallow in filth. Whimpering and truckling folds with powders for invalids, conformity goes to the fourth removed. I wear my hat indoors as well as out. Why should I pray? Why should I venerate and be ceremonious? Having pried through the strata, analyzed to a hair, counseled with doctors, and calculated close, I find no fat sweeter than that which sticks to my own bones. In all people I see myself, none more and not one a barleycorn less, and the good or bad I say of myself I say of them. I know that I am solid and sound. To me the converging objects of the universe perpetually flow. All are written to me, and I must get what that writing means. I know I am deathless. I know this orbit of mine cannot be swept by a carpenter's compass. I know that I shall not pass like a child's curlicue cut with a burnt stick at night. I know that I am august. I don't trouble my spirit to vindicate itself or to be understood. I see the elementary laws never apologize. I reckon I behave no prouder than the level I plant my house by, after all. I exist as I am. That is enough. If no other in the world be aware, I sit content. And if each and all be aware, I sit content. One world is aware, and by far the largest to me, and that is myself. And whether I come to my own today or in 10,000 or 10 million years, I can cheerfully take it now, or with equal cheerfulness I can wait. My foothold is tenoned and mortised in granite. I laugh at what you call dissolution, and I know the amplitude of time. Well, here he's sort of declaring a permanent soul, or a permanent something, some permanent mehood. But as you go on into his work, you find that it resides in the fact that he doesn't identify with anybody particular, but with everything. That there is no, that if one disappears, another will appear. That he identifies really with as much with the flux, or change or transitoriness, and with different reappearing objects, so that his notion of self or ego finally is just the awareness of objects, the awareness of, or consciousness of change, awareness of change, but no personal mehood identity. No stink of a completely 100% permanent subjective self. I mean, everything's subjective, but no fixed, closed down subjective self. So he has a few other statements. obvious ones and some very familiar. I dote on myself. There is that lot of me and all so luscious. Each moment of whatever happens thrills me with joy. I can't tell how my ankles bend, nor whence the cause of my faintest wish, nor the cause of the friendship I emit, nor the cause of the friendship I take again. Hefts of the moving world that innocent gambols, silently rising, freshly exuding, scooting obliquely high and low. Something I cannot see puts upward libidinous prongs. Seas of bright juice suffuse heaven. The earth and the sky stayed... Kerouac loved that line, by the way. Seas of bright juice suffuse heaven. He thought that was almost like Shakespeare, because it's really a weird line. Seas of bright juice suffuse heaven. The earth by the sky stayed with, the daily close of their junction. The heaved challenge from the east that moment over my head, the mocking taunt, see then whether you'll be the master. And then in part 25 of Song of Myself, he begins questioning his own identity and his ego. Dazzling and tremendous how quick the sunrise would kill me if I could not now and always send sunrise out of me. We also ascend dazzling and tremendous as the sun. We found our own, O my soul, in the calm and cool of daybreak. My voice goes after what my eyes cannot reach. I was going to say beyond what he can actually see now. With the twirl of my tongue I accomplish worlds and volumes of worlds. Speech is the twin of vision. It is unequal to measure itself. It provokes me forever. It says sarcastically, Walt, you contain enough. Why don't you let it out then? Come now, I will not be tantalized. You conceive too much of my articulation. Do you not know, O speech, how the buds beneath you are folded, waiting in gloom, protected by frost? The dirt recedes before my prophetical screams. I underlying causes to balance them at last. My knowledge, my live parts, it keeping tally with the meaning of all things. Happiness, which whoever hears me, let him or her set out forth in search of this day. My final merit, I refuse you. I refuse putting from me what I really am. Encompass words, but never try to encompass me. I crowd you sleekest and best by simply looking toward you. Writing and talk don't prove me. I carry the plenum of my proof and everything else in my face. With the hush of my lips, I wholly confound the skeptic. Well, that's still some suggestion of a self, but it gets more and more of a kind of universal self. And then a universal self with no fixed identity or no fixed location. There's actually many selves, really. The only thing they have in common is that it is awareness of some kind, and it has no explanation. Another basic Buddhist meditation notion, incidentally, is the notion of the unborn. The idea that, who created the universe? Well, the universe is spoken of as unborn and undying. Unborn in the sense that, not that it never started, but that if you try to trace it to its womb, you can't. So in that sense, unborn. You can't fix it back to a womb or birth. You could say, well, God created the universe, but then who created God? Well, God is unborn, i.e., he's just there. Who created the universe? Well, nobody created the universe, it's just there. Who created the next thought you're going to have in your head? Where did it come from? From what womb, from what cause, from what place did your thoughts come? Well, when you look at it and try to examine where the thought came from, it's unborn. It has no origin place, except you could say maybe the brain, but that's not much of an answer. Because maybe it comes from your ass, for all you know. It comes from your body, or does it come from your body? But unborn in the sense of no discernible fixed birth, place, cause, reason. With the hush of my lips, I wholly confound the skeptic. I carry the plenum of proof and everything else in my face. Writing and talk do not prove me. He has one other notion of self, well, a couple others. Since his self is so open or so loose, then he can actually connect or empathize or enter into the condition of others. You laggards there on, this is 37, section 37 of Song of Myself. You laggards there on guard, look to your arms. I am at the conquered doors they crowd. I am possessed, embody all presences, outlawed or suffering. See myself in prison, shaped in another man, shaped like another man, and feel the dull unintermitted pain. For me, the keepers of convicts shoulder their carbines and keep watch. It is I let out in the morning and barred in at night. Not a mutineer walks handcuffed to jail, but I am handcuffed to him and walk by his side. I am less the jolly one there, and more the silent one with sweat on my twitching lips. I think it's a really great line. I am less the jolly one there, and more the silent one with sweat on my twitching lips. Does anybody want to see themselves as that person? Have you ever been that one? So that's the fear that everybody's got, winding up being the real, like the real creep, like the total creep. The silent one with sweat on my twitching lips. It was interesting that he was able to empathize so completely, realizing it was true. Why not? Be afraid of. You don't have to be a coward. You don't have to be afraid of being the silent one with sweat on your twitching lips. And nobody has to be scared of being a coward or a creep. In fact, Whitman is basically saying, I, Walt Whitman, a creep, cosmos, include everything. And having included creephood, he's now free from any, he's free, because he doesn't have to be afraid of being the ultimate creep of the universe. And having accepted that, then he's open to anything, And from that point of view, anything else is an improvement. Any other condition would be an improvement, or not even an improvement in the sense that that's not so bad once you get there. So, not a youngster is taken for larceny, but I go up too and am tried and sentenced. Not a cholera patient lies at the last gasp, but I also lie at the last gasp. My face is ashen-colored, my sinews gnarl. Away from me people retreat. Askers embody themselves in me, and I am embodied in them. Askers, A-S-K-E-R-S. It's a weird word. Askers. Then he explains it. I project my hat, sit shamefaced, and beg. That's pretty good, to empathize that. I like that. The silent one with sweat on my twitching lips, and askers embody themselves. I project my hat, sit shamefaced, and beg. So this is his identity. This sense of a permanent identity is, or transcendental or universal identity is becoming more and more interesting. It isn't this great creeping luminous truth cloud. It's also the creep, beggar, whore, so that he has of his own mind, relating to the nature of mind itself, talking to the common prostitute, the verse line, not till the sun rejects you do I reject you, which is like an old haiku. I always thought, I don't know whose, the autumn moon shines kindly on the flower thief. Is similar to, you got a creep, a flower thief, somebody stealing flowers. But the autumn moon shines universally. The mind, awareness, shines universally and falls on all objects, whether creepy or glorious. So the autumn moon shines kindly on the flower thief, or not till the sun rejects you do I reject you. Just the very nature of the mind to be continuously aware, continuously perceptive, continuously sensitive, continuously precise, except if you cloud it over, well, I don't like that one, with discriminations and revulsion. Insistent assertion. So the further word on the ego is the famous line. I'll give it in context about contradicting himself. Remember, we were talking about. Might as well read the end of Song of Myself, the last two sections. Interesting as verse, by the way. The rest of the book is quite thick verse, line following line. When you get to the very end, it's like 1 or 2 line stanzas. It's sort of floating last thoughts. The verse form is like floating last thoughts, rather than the thick, heavy catalogues that he has establishing his ground at the very beginning. So, there is that in me. I do not know what it is, but I know it is in me. Wrenched and sweaty, calm and cool then my body becomes. I sleep long. I do not know it. It is without name. It is a word unsaid. It is not in any dictionary, utterance, or symbol. Something it swings on more than the earth I swing on. To it the creation is the friend whose embracing awakes me. Perhaps I might tell more. Outlines. I plead for my brothers and sisters. Do you not see, O my brothers and sisters? It is not chaos or death. It is form, union, plan. It is eternal life. It is happiness. In 51 section, the past and present wilt. I filled them, emptied them, and proceed to fill my next fold of the future. Listener, up there. It's us. So in a sense, his awareness encompasses us. He's addressing us directly now. Listener, up there on the second floor of Naropa. 100 years hence. If this is 1852 or something, this is now a good 100 years later. So it's listener up there. What have you to confide to me? Look in my face while I snuff the sidle of evening. Talk honestly. No one else hears you, and I stay only a minute longer. Do I contradict myself? Very well. Then I contradict myself. I am large. I contain multitudes. Okay, now what does that mean? Or could that just him, or is that you and me? Or is that you? Yeah, I think so. I think it's like so great that he said it. It's recognizable, because everybody contradicts themselves. But the key here is that the contradiction doesn't mean you have to necessarily eliminate one or the other.
Both.
Yeah, both. Yeah. So it's a little bit like that, what's the negative capability again? Co-emergent wisdom. Can you explain that a little? That's co-emergent wisdom is a advanced Buddhist notion.
Well, basically, it's like the mind contains simultaneous
Opposites.
opposites. So you have good and bad, negative, positive, that actually you see the roses is energy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the roses. It's the same energy.
Uh-huh.
It takes different form and shape. When you recognize that, then you don't get so freaked out by the dualities.
Mm-hmm. In the highest theoretical terms, it refers to the notion, well, let's say something more direct in English, that the universe is completely solid and real, which everybody knows. Here we are, and I got a broken pinky, so that couldn't be more real. On the other hand, the universe is completely empty. There's absolutely nothing happening. Now, how many have had the experience of the universe, nothing happening, that the universe is empty? How many have had that? What do you mean? Can anybody possibly explain that? What that actually comes down to? Oh, we've all been through states where the universe is emotionally empty, where we've been burnt out, let us say, and we ain't got nothing to look for, up to, with to, into, out of, just sort of like dull, dread, drear depression. But that's not quite that emptiness I was talking about. That could be considered an emptiness. There's also the emptiness of Actually, in Buddhist terms, I think we were talking the other day, there are 27 different kinds of emptiness. But, or as Kerouac said, whichever way you slice it, it's still empty, delightful baloney. In Mexico City Blues. The emptiness is the emptiness as of a dream, that when the dream is over, though it seems solid, the dream is over. So when you get old, you look back on your youth and say, where did it all go? Or, yeah, there's an old Jewish fellow on his deathbed. And his last words were, where did it all go? So where did it all go? That aspect of emptiness. Where did it all go? Which everybody's experienced. Everybody's experienced that, I think. You know, even in adolescence, you remember that as a childhood. And then there's the emptiness of certain moments of, on the mountain or in the city, seeing the great vastness of the universe and the leaves falling silently. And a sense of the mirror-like emptiness of the entire universe, that it goes on forever and forever. Sort of like one of those things in the glass bowl where you turn it upside down and the snow falls. Totally silent. That kind of silence. Maybe silence in terms, or emptiness in terms of empty of sound, vast silence. Or emptiness in terms of our appreciation of vastness itself. That it's so vast, it's practically empty. As the scientists say about the universe. The universe is so big that if you average out what's in it, there's hardly anything there. Yeah.
I think I'm beginning to understand the answer to the question, but I just wonder that, if we're faced with all this emptiness, then what's the point of writing? I mean, doesn't writing just become kind of a prattle, a self-indulgent prattle?
Well, that's a classical question. Well, that's a famous question. If everything's empty, why do anything? Well, but that depends what we mean by the emptiness. Emptiness also can mean liberation from prison, in the sense that things are wide open. It can mean openness. Emptiness can also mean openness, wide openness. Things are open onto the sky. Things are no limit, infinite, no limit. If everything was solid, there'd have to be a thingy limit. There'd have to be, but this way it's a universe without limit, in a sense. Emotionally also. Yes. When you see, well, how do we do it in terms of our own experience? Associated with the notion of emptiness in Buddhist terms and in mystical terms is also the notion of luminosity. That is to say, the image I was giving of the silence of a vast scene with the leaves falling at a sunset, maybe, or something. There is some sense of glory or luminosity to the great silence, as some eternality sense, which is also associated with a sense of vastness. It's also associated with a sense of silence, maybe, and also associated with a sense of emptiness. Empty of human grasping. Empty of thinking, empty of conceptions. It might be full of things, but there's no scheming thought. Thought dissolves, maybe. I think emptiness, psychologically speaking, when Buddhists and others speak of emptiness, they mean empty of projections, conceptions, heavy thinking, empty of a network of mental manipulation of the scene. That is a moment that you get this sense of vastness and silence in a moment of inattention, in a moment when you're not expecting anything or paying attention, in a moment of distraction, so to speak. All of a sudden you get a glimpse that's empty compared to what you were thinking about dinner. Well, I think the psychedelic experience was so popular because it related to a natural experience that many people have had and written about. In intimations of immortality in early childhood, and like William James's anesthetic experience or any of the varieties of religious experience in his book. And the psychedelics were a way of catalyzing those. And for those who were of stable character and weren't so neurotic that they would get entangled in their projections, the psychedelics might be useful. But you really would have to be centered. And you'd have to be maybe, accomplished in staying with your breath and not getting lost in your thoughts. Otherwise... Yeah. So... Watching thoughts. Yeah. Right. Right. Well, I'll get back to psychedelics in a minute, because we're back to sitting. The other aspect of emptiness is the gap in between thoughts. Or where did the thoughts come from? Or what is the nature of inside your head anyway? Or close your eyes is what's in there. Actually, literally, let us all close our eyes for 1 minute or 1 second or two. While I'm talking at the moment, can you please close your eyes? It's sort of an object lesson, because I got my eyes closed, and I would like us all to be looking at the same thing while I'm talking right now. So we're all in one place, I take it, right? Is that right? Yeah. Okay, so if you got your eyes closed, what do you see? Well, maybe there's some lights and some crisscross patterns and dots and purples or whatever. But basically, if you look, it's the same spaciousness as the sky. It's endless. I mean, you can't figure an end to it. It doesn't seem to exist any special place, except it's everywhere. It's quite universal. It has no personal identity. It can be filled up with dreams or by opening the eyes, but it certainly is a space that would accommodate anything, from lovers to monsters to planets to universes. It's very interesting. It's really amazing, and it's completely empty. And if you open your eyes, which I have now, I've opened mine now. If you open your eyes, actually look out at the sky, you have basically the same condition of spaciousness. So that aspect of spaciousness might be considered a form of emptiness. Yeah?
Something else in Buddhism which is really vital, about your question, which is compassion. And it's not...
We haven't come to that yet.
Well, the notion is that it's not idiot compassion, but true compassion in approach.
But how does it relate to emptiness?
It only can come out of it.
How come?
Because
I mean, step by step.
without a ground of projections and neuroses, without using as your ground your interpretation and your authorship on the world, and you have a sense of emptiness and accepting things as they are, and you're vastly into everything, there's a notion of appropriate behavior that should come out of that. So that
How? You just can't say it. You got to.
it naturally arises.
How?
You can't
Why?
you have to experience.
Do you understand that it naturally rises out of emptiness?
You have to try it.
Ah, that's not good enough. We're in a class. We got to explain it.
We've all experienced it.
We got to explain it better.
It's the idea that you don't go into a situation with an idea about how to act in the situation, but without using any kind of conception as to what is appropriate or inappropriate on the spot. If your mind is empty, then you can do it through sitting. If you walk out of this room at 9 o'clock after sitting, and there's something totally bizarre happening outside, your mind is more empty and more able. Believe me, I know.
No, that.
Well, I mean, from my
No, believe me, I saw God yesterday. I think we have to adduce it, as Anne says, from where we've all experienced it, but maybe give examples.
Well, there's this sense of unconditionality to some of our experience, and often it's like when someone dies, when you fall in love.
Okay, yeah, that's a good one. There's a good one. Someone very close dies. There's a big emptiness. Your father died. We've left behind a big emptiness. At that moment, you feel tremendous compassion for not only the people, the guy that died, realizing all the struggle he had, but also the people around, who are grief-stricken and are themselves in the same condition of going to die too, and yourself. And so there's this vast sense of sympathy, which rises directly out of the sense of loss or emptiness or the sudden realization that things are so transitory that you can die and disappear, and everything you thought was permanent be gone, and there'd be no reference point, and everything empty, and oh, how dear it was and is now. And when somebody very close dies, you get the sense of dearness of all the relatives, if you're assuming that there's some kind of family connection still.
What's the similarity between night and falling in love? Why are those two examples ones that are always given to people who have an experience of meditation like this?
I'm not sure, except when you fall in love. When?
Beyond hope and fear.
Yeah. So when you fall in love, there's also, you're sort of at rest and happy that you have attained the fullness or fulfillment, and that tends to spill over on other people, that you don't have an axe to, you're not mad at anybody. Yeah. Because you're not mad at anybody. There's no obstruction to seeing other people because you've already got your food, or you got your emotional connection. I know that when I'm in love, I feel more generous toward other people. Yeah.
In relation to the three characteristics of existence,
Yeah.
The way I got them from your take on them was, what do you need the third? What do you need the third one for? If all constituents of being are transitory, that includes no permanent selfhood. It'd be just like you can't step on the same body twice.
Right. You can't step in the same body twice. Well, I think the third one comes out of the third one. They're all intertwined, and the third one comes out of the second one and is implied in the second one. But I think the third one is there as the statement of non-theism. No permanent, supreme, absolute self, including God.
Is that the translation that you'll read? There's no permanent selfhood?
An-atma. Atman, an-atma. Absence of a... Well, I like to say it, absence of selfhood, because that's much better understood in English psychological terms, American psychological terms.
But there is a sense of a transitory selfhood, or
Oh, yeah.
objective selfhood.
Yes.
Because I suppose what my question really gets towards is this feeling that I have a separation.
Yeah.
And when I think of Whitman especially, and his identification with everything,
Yeah.
and that kind of connection of that with spaciousness and emptiness, I have a distinct experience of separateness. I mean,
Yeah.
you are there, I am here, we are both transitory
Right.
beings, but we are separate.
Okay. But actually, the reason I brought up emptiness was in relation to negative capability, do I contradict myself, co-emergent wisdom. So and I was beginning to say, the classical example of co-emergent wisdom or contradiction is that everything is empty, and yet at the same time, simultaneously, all at once, everything is completely full and real. Both at once. Certainly we are separate entities and we're really here, and as I say...
It's like how it is inside the mind, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Particles spin both ways.
Yeah. So the traditional thing is, form is emptiness, emptiness is form. Emptiness is no different from form, form is no different from emptiness. That's the Prajnaparamita Sutra, the highest perfect wisdom sutra. Does anybody know that? How many know of that here? Prajnaparamita, highest perfect. Let's see. I used to know some of it by heart. I can remember some of it. And it's like a poem. It's a terrific poem. Well, whatever we can do, whatever means we have, is the situation is a compassionate aspect of awareness, Avalokiteshvara, compassion, is practicing meditation, highest perfect wisdom, when he perceived that the 5 heaps of appearance are all empty. And that relieved all his suffering. And then he addressed himself to his pupil Sariputra and said, Sariputra, this is the original character of everything. Not born, not annihilated, not tainted, not pure, doesn't increase, doesn't decrease. Therefore, in emptiness, no form, no sensation, no thought, no appearance, no imagination, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no color, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, until we come to also no world of consciousness, no ignorance, also no combat against ignorance, and no end of ignorance, no nirvana, no path, no wisdom, also no attainment, because no non-attainment, no suffering, no cause of suffering, no combat against suffering in old age and death. But basically, no nirvana, no path, no wisdom, no attainment. Every Buddha, every awakened mind depends on highest perfect wisdom, because the mind isn't an obstacle then. Then he goes on to give a mantra. Therefore, I know that this highest perfect wisdom is the great holy formula, magic spell, the great untainted magic spell, the supreme magic spell, the incomparable magic spell, is capable of assuaging all suffering. True, because not false. Because he hasn't asserted anything. Then they give the traditional formula, gate, gate, paragate, parasam gate, bodhisvaha, gate. Ga, Indo-Sanskrit, and we are Indo-Sanskrit in language. Gate is gone, gone. Gate, gone. Paragate, parapsychology. Organ. Summa theologica, parasamgate, gone over the top. Organ, the top organ, gone way over. Parasamgate, bodhi, wakened mind, salutations. Yeah. Or gone, completely gone to the other shore, gone. It means to the other shore of conceptualization, beyond ideas. Similar to what Whitman is saying about on my lips, without opening my mouth, the plenum of proof. Just on my face, just where I am is what I am, and that's that. But what I meant with this big loop was in this Prajnaparamita, there is at the beginning there is Sariputra. This is the original character of everything. O Sariputra, form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. Form is not different from emptiness. Emptiness is not different from form. Sensation, thought, imagination, and consciousness are also like this. Now, what he means there is just what the same as the psychological experience that we've been talking about, of being here for real, and undoubtedly real, and that's a lot of Zen, is, the things are really real. So shit when you shit, eat when you eat, fuck when you fuck, walk when you walk, die when you die, paint when you paint, write when you write, speak when you speak, do it. Breathe, above all, as we are learning, breathe when you breathe. Be aware of breathing when you're breathing. But at the same time, when you become aware of breathing, then the breathing and the awareness become somewhat empty feeling. You're unlocatable, just like when you close your eyes to see the dark inside, you realize there's also an aspect of it, which is emptiness, simultaneous with the aspect of fullness. And you might get that as an emotional twinge in the midst of the deepest love moment. Just during or after orgasm, of the transitoriness and emptiness of it, sometimes, as well as the complete fulfillment of it. Yeah.
Did Whitman have any teachers that he looked to that you know specifically? If not, how did he come to this wisdom?
Well, I think he was very much influenced by Emerson and the American Transcendentalists and all that was going on with the upsurge of spiritual feeling at the mid-life. He was friends with a Mr. Maurice Bucke, B-U-C-K-E, a Dr. Bucke, who wrote a book called, a very famous book, like the Varieties of Religious Experience, called Cosmic Consciousness. And Dr. Bucke's book featured a great deal of Whitman as an exemplar, a modern avatar of cosmic consciousness. Also, a very interesting thing in his old age, you know how what a great Illuminati Blake is. You know, Blake is a great visionary poet. Blake's first biographer was Mr. Alexander Gilchrist. He died before he finished this great biography. Mrs. Gilchrist finished the biography. Then she read Walt Whitman. Blake is what? It died in 1829, is it? Something like that. Gilchrist was a contemporary of Blake, but then died. Mrs. Gilchrist finished the biography, say 1850 or 60, read Whitman, as Swinburne and a lot of other English poets did, and it blew her mind. She recognized the same sort of cosmic consciousness as Blake, or the same universal sympathy, let us say. Didn't want to make it too mystical, really. Didn't want to get it out of the realm of what we can experience ourselves. So she recognized this sort of twinge of sympathy and vastness in his work. And so she moved bag and baggage to Philadelphia and hired a big house and a carriage and wanted to marry Walt Whitman and thrust herself upon him. And he reacted with quite a bit of revulsion at first. But she really was sincere, and she really was smart, and she really was his equal spiritually, in a way, or very much she was very much a sensitive person, and you might say an old soul, to use the antique vocabulary. She herself was an old soul. So they got to be friends. And in his old age, she would send a carriage from Philadelphia to cross the bridge or the ferry to Camden and pick him up in his little Camden house and take him for supper. And because of her familiarity with Blake, Whitman got familiar with Blake and took up a subscription of monies to build himself a tomb. And the tomb of Whitman you'll find in Camden is drawn from Blake's draft design for the door to death at the opening page of Jerusalem. There's a triangular lintel. No, lintel. What is it? A top. The lintel is the bottom part, I guess. The door lintel. Then a stone wall, stone step, 2 stone slabs for the side of the door in the house, and then one slab and another slab coming down triangular, and a cross slab for above the door. What is it? Anybody know enough architecture to know the terms? No? Lintel is the top. Lintel and limbs, maybe, or lintel and roof. But it's an exact replica of Blake's fantastic design for the door to death. Yeah.
I just wanted to, the story goes of Gilchrist that actually they had this correspondence.
Right.
And he sent her a friendship ring. So I think at some point he was entertaining more into the religion.
Yeah.
And then freaked out when she actually moved to America.
Yeah, I suspect that he was just being sympathetic and sending a friendship ring, and she intuited a deeper sympathy, latently a deeper sympathy, or a yearning for some deeper sympathy.
I heard that she wrote him, I want to have your children, and I'm on
Yeah, probably scared him. Anyway, so he did have, in that sense, if not teachers, he sure had connection with the wider world than provincial American Swedenborgian mysticism. But I don't know if he had any direct teacher. And the weird thing about him was that he was a journalist and a newspaper man for many years, and pretty jejune. He wrote temperance novels. And if you take a look at the prose in them, they look sophomoric, like moralistic, just the opposite of Whitman. Very, very intensely naively moralistic. So who knows? Well, I was finishing. So anyway, the example of, do I contradict myself in his work and elsewhere, or negative capability, co-emergent wisdom. The Buddhist view of version would be form and emptiness. Contradictory things, form and emptiness, are identical. Or form is empty. It's form, it's here, but it's empty of permanent characteristics, essence, or soul. Empty of soul, empty of permanence. Therefore, like a dream, empty. As a dream is both full and empty. And that's contrary to, as Burroughs keeps pointing out, contrary to all Western thinking, which is Aristotelian, which is that a thing is either A or not A. But it's not both at once. Usually Western thinking and Catholic thinking is based on the sort of almost arithmetical, this is A, and or it is not A. This is black or it's white or blue, but it's not black and blue and white simultaneously. So I finished the last of Song of Myself. Do I contradict myself? Very well then, I contradict myself. I am large. I contain multitudes. And that third line was the best part of it. I contain multitudes. Well, obviously, look in your head, and you'll notice that you contain multitudes, that there's millions of thoughts. Millions and millions of thoughts, and you open your eyes, and there's millions of faces and eyes, and millions of trees. So you do contain multitudes in the sense of entertaining multitudes of thoughts, containing them in your head, containing them in your consciousness. And as for the phenomenal world outside, it is all suspended in your consciousness or awareness and in your optical field and auditory field and sensory fields. So in that sense, contain. So I am large, I contain multitudes. It's literal in a funny way. I concentrate, however, toward them that are nigh. I wait on the door slab. Who has done his day's work? Who will soonest be through with his supper? Who wishes to walk with me? Will you speak before I am gone? Will you prove already too late? 52, and last. The spotted hawk swoops by and accuses me. He complains of my gab and loitering. I too am not a bit tamed. I too am untranslatable. I sound my barbaric yawp over the roofs of the world. The last scud of day holds back for me. It flings my likeness after the rest and true as any on the shadowed wilds. It coaxes me to the vapor and the dusk. I depart as air. I shake my white locks at the runaway sun. I effuse my flesh in eddies and drift it in lacy jags. You will hardly know who I am, I bequeath myself to the dirt to grow from the grass I love. That's pretty good. It's literal. I bequeath myself to the dirt. Nobody could accuse him of being poetic. It's literal. I bequeath myself to the dirt to grow from the grass I love. If you want me again, look for me under your boot soles. You will hardly know who I am or what I mean, but I shall be good health to you nevertheless, and filter and fiber your blood. Failing to fetch me at first, keep encouraged. Missing me one place, search another. I stop somewhere, waiting for you. So he says he's waiting. So what's waiting, or who is waiting? Well, in a sense, we're all waiting for ourselves. So the last aspect that we haven't covered, well, do you have any questions further? The title of this lecture was supposed to be Whitman in terms of his basic vision, which I think we covered somewhat, his identity, his sense of identity, both political and personal. And then I had particulars, by which I mean details. So once you get this kind of panoramic awareness, or once you enter into this mood, let us say, what kind of results do you get in terms of direct perceptions? And that connects this aspect of open mind with or omid mind or meditative mind with clear seeing. I think we spoke of the relation between meditation practice and clear seeing. Has that been covered at all by anyone? The kind of meditation we do here following the breath is called shamatha, S-A-M-A-T-H-A, which we mentioned. And that traditionally is connected with the development of clear seeing, or in Sanskrit, vipassana. That is to say, if you're not busy thinking, then you'll hear the rustling of cobwebs. If you're not busy daydreaming, you'll hear the traffic outside, or the whir of an air conditioner, or the creak of a bone, or the buzz of a bee. If your mind is empty, like Emily Dickinson, quote, I heard a fly buzz when I died, unquote. At this big moment, like completely empty, then the sound of the fly is becomes a giant sound. So, while it's sort of the image given very often is of a fishbowl where you stir up the dirt. When the dirt settles and the mind quietens down, then you see clearly in the fishbowl all the details of the objects in the bowl. It's a common experience and a common image. So vipassana is the consequence of emptying the mind, or let us say more detailed awareness or precise awareness, or it's the cause of that luminosity. Luminosity in the sense of things are so clear because you have no trip you're projecting on them, or you're not distracted from noticing things because you're not thinking of somewhere else. So, in a sense, from this kind of solid position of openness of Whitman, now let's see what he does with details or particulars. This is part 8 of Song of Myself. The little one sleeps in its cradle. I lift the gauze and look a long time and silently brush away flies with my hand. So this from now on will be like a series of little American haikus, in a way, one line each or one phrase each to capture a natural fact, spontaneously glimpsed or noticing what he noticed. The youngster and the red-faced girl turn aside up the bushy hill. I peeringly view them from the top. What's a whole little drama, actually? 2 lines. The suicide sprawls on the bloody floor of the bedroom. I witness the corpse with its dabbled hair. I note where the pistol has fallen. The dabbled hair is good. The blab of the pave. The blab of the pavement? The blab of the pave. Tires of carts, slough of boot soles, talk of the promenaders, the heavy omnibus. The driver was with his interrogating thumb. Get that? The driver with his interrogating thumb. Where are you going? Or who got your ticket? Or what's an interrogating thumb? It's such a vivid thing. The clank of the shod horses on the granite floor, the snow sleighs, clinking, shouted jokes, pelts of snowballs, the hurrahs for popular favorites, the fury of roused mobs, the flap of the curtained litter, the sick man inside borne to the hospital, the meeting of enemies, the sudden oath, the blows and fall, the excited crowd, the policeman with his star quickly working his passage to the center of the crowd. That's kind of interesting as a haiku, you might even say. The excited crowd, the policeman with his star quickly working his passage to the center of the crowd. The excited crowd. The policeman with his star quickly working his passage to the center of the excited crowd. 19 or something. It would make it, almost make it. Well, I mean, if you were counting. If you're not counting, it makes it. The impassive stones that receive and return so many echoes, the groans of overfed or half-starved who fall sunstruck or in fits. What exclamations of women taken suddenly who hurry home and give birth to babes. What living and buried speech is always vibrating there. What howls restrained by decorum, arrests of criminals, slights, adulterous offers made, acceptances, rejections with convex lips. That convex lips is really great. What is convex? Concave would be out. No. Take your hand off my knee. Rejections with convex lips. It's such a funny phrase. I keep stumbling on that phrase. Rejections with convex lips. It reminds me of a gay bar or something. I mind them or the show or resonance of them. I come and I depart. Well, that's one example of his particulars. We've got another couple minutes, so I'll get into a little more. Animate catalogs, particular animate catalogs are kind of interesting. The famous one, the most famous of his catalogs of details, is the one that begins, "The pure contralto sings in the organ loft," part 15, or section 15 of Song of Myself. And I just want to read a couple lines of that. It begins, just to build up a lot of detail, "The pure contralto sings in the organ loft. The carpenter dresses his plank. The tongue of his foreplane whistles its wild ascending lisp." The plane going... It's an amazing piece of noticing. The tongue of his foreplane whistles his wild ascending lisp. Then I'll go on. "The lunatic is carried at last to the asylum, a confirmed case. He will never sleep any more as he did in the cot in his mother's bedroom." That's Whitman's brother, I think, was that way. And some of Peter Orlovsky's brothers are in that condition. He will never sleep any more as he did in the cot in his mother's bedroom. The Jower printer with gray head and gaunt jaws works at his case. He turns the quid of tobacco while his eyes blur with the manuscript. The malformed limbs are tied to the surgeon's table. What is removed drops horribly into a pail. The young fellow drives the express wagon. I love him, though I don't know him. The youth lies awake in the cedar-roofed garret and harks to the musical rain. The connoisseur peers along the exhibition gallery with half-shut eyes bent sideways, looking at it. That's a real good one. It's like a little quick sketch, like a little cartoon sketch. The paving man leans on his two-handed rammer. So there's really actually accurate observation of detail. The paving man leans on his two-handed rammer. The reporter's lead flies swiftly over the notebook. The sign painter is lettering with blue and gold. The peddler sweats with his pack on his back. The purchaser higgling about an odd cent. The opium eater reclines with rigid head and just opened lips. The prostitute draggles her shawl. Her bonnet bobs on her tipsy and pimpled neck. As the fare collector goes through the train, he gives notice by the jingling of loose change. That's a terrific one. That's almost clearly pure haiku. As the fare collector goes through the train, he gives notice by the jingling of loose change. It's the noticing of some very precise, delicate, tiny detail, which is so common that you notice it all the time, but you don't notice that you notice it. So the poetry is like noticing you noticed. Patriarchs sit at supper with sons and great-grandsons about them. The old husband sleeps by his wife, and the young husband sleeps by his wife, and these tend inward to me, and I tend outward to them, and such as it is to be of these more or less I am, and of these one and all I weave this song of myself. So, that's pretty good. And the next line is, I am of the old as well as the young and foolish, the unwise as well as the wise. So that's that.